Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our leadership series. We're going to spend the month of August talking about problem solving and decision making. There's a relatively unknown humorous illustration about decision making that features a hungry donkey standing equally distanced from two piles of hay. And incapable of deciding which pile of hay is closer, the donkey freezes up and eventually dies of starvation. And the story attempts to illustrate a paradox. The donkey has a need, and whether by his good luck or blessings from above, he's provided an abundance. With abundance, though, a decision is introduced, and a decision becomes a curse when our donkey is incapacitated by the freedom to make a choice. The illustration is known as Buridan's ass because a philosopher by the name of Jean Buridan once argued that humans, when faced with alternative courses of action, would always choose the greater good. And people were like, well, Jean, what if the two choices are equally good? And if I were Jean, I would have been like, that's not possible. Something will always be different. But Jean, who apparently wasn't a great philosopher, was like, well, in that situation, they'd have to suspend their judgment until one of the two options becomes the greater good. And so the people who came up with Buridan's ass's dilemma decided that they demonstrate through their illustration the absurdity of how that would play out. Anyway, the paradox still applies today because we all know what it is to suffer paralysis by analysis. We all know what it's like to get stuck between multiple options and to become immobilized because we just can't pull the trigger. However, there are times when a decision needs to be made quickly, right? Perhaps you're up against a deadline, or maybe the situation has become dire and there's no more time to deliberate or debate. The longer you wait, the more difficult the decision is going to become. So what if I told you that there's a method that can help in those moments, a process that you can trust to help you make a wise decision when one is demanded of you? I know, I sound like a salesman right now, but let's explore something called the OODA loop. Now, the person who devised this decision-making matrix is a guy by the name of Colonel John Boyd. He was a former U.S. fighter pilot and went on to become this famous military strategist. While fighting in Vietnam, Boyd realized that when it comes to war, the path to success and victory was starting to change pretty dramatically. With the dawn of the Industrial Revolution, the path to winning a war was basically mathematical. I mean, generally speaking, the side with the most firepower and the most people fighting on its behalf was going to win the war, but Vietnam didn't work that way, and the experience taught Boyd several important lessons. What Boyd understood was that victory is no longer achieved through attrition. It's achieved by rapidly acquiring accurate information and then acting upon that information. So he developed an acronym known as the OODA loop. Observe, orient, decide, act, then observe, orient, decide, act, and repeat forever until you die. Let me give it to you with some synonyms. Gather information. Ignore what you expected to see and see what's actually happening right now. Understand your situation as accurately as possible, and then interpret that information. Filter it through your own experiences, your training, your education, but also be aware of your biases. Then pick a course of action. Know that perfection is not likely. Just choose wisely. Do something. Implement something. Make an adjustment. And then the loop is important, right? Watch how reality changes and adjust. Now, I suspect there's a few people who might be disappointed. There's going to be some people who are thinking, that's not that impressive. It's logic. And yet in organizations everywhere, we observe decision-making processes that operate something like this. Someone observes, and then there's a meeting, and then there are some discussions, and then there's a decision that's made, but that's to wait. And then everyone meets again, and this time there's some further analysis done and there's more discussion. And then eventually a decision is made, but still there's no action done because the person who was supposed to implement the decision didn't know he was. And then finally the act is committed. And then by then it's too late because reality has already changed. What OODA stresses is that you'll rarely run into the kind of massive, vital decisions that must take, several board meetings to conclude if you're constantly applying OODA to the smaller decisions that your organization encounters every day. Furthermore, and a huge part of why I endorse this method, is OODA encourages learning at a faster pace because if you're practicing it regularly, you're constantly adapting to the situations that you find yourself in. So here's an example. Let's say your organization receives a complaint. So the observation is, okay, a customer took the time to file a complaint. Let's orient it. Is this an isolated incident? Was this a systemic problem? Was it tied to a specific employee? Does it involve a competitor? Is it tied to pricing? Is it service-oriented? Now make a decision. Offer a replacement, investigate a flawed process, retrain an employee, give a refund, and then do what you decided to do. And observe what happens afterwards. What's the customer's response? What has changed, if anything? What have you learned from the experience? Now, if you're anything like me, you're probably a little bit dissatisfied with this conclusion because let's face it, there is a pink elephant in the OODA acronym that I know I blew right past. And there's probably a few of you that were thinking, hold the show, brother. Let's put a stop sign right here and deal with this. And I want you to know, I understand what you're thinking. So in the next video, I promise that we will discuss how that O for orient makes this entire exercise a hell of a lot more complicated than I just made it sound. Until then, thanks for watching.